Well, a few of you have asked me from time to time how I go about preparing for my Sunday messages. Many of you know that our readings each week come from the Revised Common Lectionary, which many Christian churches follow. On Monday morning of every week, I get up and I pray with the upcoming Sunday's Gospel passage. And then it continues to live with me throughout the week, not only during my prayer time, but just in my thoughts throughout the day. And it's really like my spiritual food for the week. I'm always so amazed and always so surprised at how God speaks to me and nourishes me through these beautiful gospel stories of Jesus. And the stories that we've been reading since Easter, the resurrection stories, have nourished me very much in the past 3 weeks. I think that they are the most beautiful stories in the gospel. And I will admit to you that the past 3 weeks I have been brought to tears several times in my prayer time reading these beautiful resurrection stories. I mean, who among us does not want to experience what those disciples did, to experience the risen Christ in our midst, calling us intimately by name? Who among us does not want to experience the divine light, union with God? A God that says to us, I have called you by name. You are mine, my beloved. How beautiful. That's what we want. That's what we want to experience. And that's what the disciples experience here. But notice that in all the stories, the disciples don't recognize Jesus. They don't recognize him in form. It is only when he calls them by name that they recognize that it's Jesus. So we had this story a few weeks ago of Mary Magdalene. She's at the empty tomb, and she thinks that she's talking to the gardener. It's only when the gardener says, Mary, that she recognizes that that was Jesus. Last week, Thomas didn't believe until Jesus appeared and said, Thomas, touch me. And then he said, my Lord and my God. He got that was Jesus. And in today's gospel story, Simon Peter, Jesus' right-hand man, doesn't even recognize that that man on the shore is Jesus. But then we know Jesus 3 times calls him by name, Simon, son of John. It is in the calling that we experience the risen Christ. If we're looking for a certain form, we won't really recognize Jesus. So, for example, we sing at the beginning of our service, surely the presence of the Lord is in this place. And it is. We feel it on Sunday. But if you're looking around the room for the form, if you're looking for the guy with the long beard and the robe and the sandals, you're not going to recognize him. And the disciples, who were his best friends, don't even recognize him because it's no longer about the form. It's about the calling, the voice. It's about the Spirit. When Jesus said throughout the Gospels, in my name, he didn't mean in my name, Jesus. He meant in my spirit. That's where we will experience the risen Christ. Now, this story today, for me, is probably the most moving of the resurrection stories, because I really feel what Simon Peter must have been feeling at this point. He had left everything behind to follow Jesus. He really thought that he had a future with Jesus. And now he sees that Jesus has been crucified. And he's probably thinking, now what do I do? So the story finds him lost and confused, and what's most sad to me, I guess, is that he wants to go back to the life that he once knew before he met Jesus. He goes back to that same place, and he tries to become a fisherman again. That was the life he knew before Jesus. So instead of moving forward, he's going backwards, trying to be what he once was before Jesus. And notice he couldn't catch any fish. He couldn't do it anymore. So let's look at Peter's backstory for a moment, if you will. We first meet him in the Gospels when his name is Simon. And he's out there fishing, because he was a fisherman, and sees Jesus for the first time. And Jesus says, "Leave your boat and your net on the shore. Come, follow me. I'm going to make you a fisher of men." And Simon is so drawn to Jesus that he does just that. He leaves everything to follow Jesus. And things are going really well, so well, that Jesus says to him, "Simon, I'm going to call you Peter, because Peter means rock. And you are going to be the foundation on which I build my church." So he makes Peter, Simon Peter, his right-hand man, who's going to take over for him. Now, I want to just interject something here before we go further. There is a lot of confusion about what Jesus meant by "build my church." Jesus never wanted Simon Peter or anyone else to start a religion called Christianity. He didn't. He never wanted anyone to go out, he never instructed them to go out and build structures called churches where he could be worshipped and people could say how amazing he was. He didn't want that. Jesus didn't want to start a new religion. Jesus already had a religion. It was a religion he loved. He was a devout Jew. And I told you before, if you want to follow the religion of Jesus, then become Jewish, because that was his religion. When Jesus said, "build my church," the word that was used was ecclesia. It was translated into church, and we think that this is a church. But an ecclesia was an assembly of people, and the word means called out. People who were called out. And it came from a term where a town crier would come into the center of the village and would shout out the news, and people would come out of their homes to hear it. So what Jesus is saying to Simon Peter is, after I'm gone in physical form and I can no longer speak, I'm making you the foundation. You're going to go out and you're going to call people from their homes, from their old way of life, to gather together and to hear. Remember, it's the speaking of the name, to come out and to do that. So that's what Jesus was saying in "you're going to found my church," is that you're going to continue to speak and to teach and to call people to this way of life. It was not the founding of an organized religion or the building of a church. It was a calling together an assembly of people. Now Peter, when Jesus is arrested, Peter says to Jesus, "I will never leave you." But then what happens? The authorities start questioning Peter, and he denies that he knows Jesus. Not once, he does it 3 times. So imagine how terrible he feels in this gospel story. That not only is he lost and confused, but he's got to feel horrible that he denied his friend and his teacher 3 times. But then what happens? The story is so beautiful. Jesus comes to him, the risen Christ, and 3 times says, "Do you love me?" 1 for each of the denials. He's basically saying to Peter, "I'm wiping this clean. I love you unconditionally. I forgive you. Now let's go forward, not backward. You're not here to catch fish anymore. We've got to move forward. I made you a fisher of men." And of course, that's exactly what Peter would do, is he would go forward, and the Spirit of the Christ worked through him, and he spread the teachings and the message of Jesus to so many people. So let's talk about this story for us, because all the gospel stories, including Simon Peter's story, is our story. Jesus says, "Feed my sheep, be fishers of men." What does that mean for us? Some Christians think that fishers of men means we have to go and convert people to Christianity. I shared with you last week that there are some Christians who are kind of aggressive and kind of arrogant, that they say, "We have the answer, and this is the answer for everybody," and that their mission is to take their beliefs and impose them on everyone. To say to the 1.5 billion Muslims, "You got it all wrong, we've got the answer." To say to the 1 billion Hindus, "Oh, you're doing it all wrong, this is how you pray." Christian missionaries have done terrible damage in the world, going into places where people have a beautiful connection to God and saying to them, "Oh no, that's not how you do it. We have the answer, and you must be converted to this one. That's what Jesus told us to do." But Jesus actually didn't say that. We don't see Hindus, we don't see Buddhists going into African countries and giving out their holy books and saying, "We'll build you hospitals and schools, but you've got to convert to our religion." Only Christians do that. We don't see Jewish people knocking on people's doors trying to convert them into becoming Jewish. Only Christians do that. Jesus did not want us to convert people to a religion. He didn't want a new religion. And even if he did, think about it. Would he want people to gather together and say how amazing he was and to worship him? He wasn't about ego. It was never about him. He wanted us to convert ourselves. Conversion means transformation. Jesus wanted us to transform ourselves and to understand that it's not about the form, it's about the spirit. That's who we were, spiritual beings. He wanted us to get that. And that's what he wanted Peter to do, was to go out and spread that message to everyone. That if you follow what he called the way, which was the way of unconditional love, the way of radical inclusion, the way of forgiveness, that you too would experience the Spirit of the Christ. And that's why we, this ecclesia, we gather together every Sunday morning. Because we come together to experience that Spirit of the Christ every Sunday morning. We're here to feed on it. We want to feed ourselves spiritually, and we feed one another spiritually. So for us to evangelize means to say to people just what Jesus said. He said, "Come and see. Come and see." I know that many of you here, the reason that you come here to this church is because somebody at this church said to you, "Come and see." And you may have said, "I'm never going into church again for the rest of my life. I've been so wounded by church." And the person said, "No, come and see. This is different. This isn't the church that you remember." And I know it's hard for us to do that. I know some of you may be out at a dinner party and just kind of casually mention that you go to church. And maybe some people's eyes glaze over, or they roll their eyes and think, "You go to church?" But for us to evangelize means that we say, "Come and see. Come and see what this is about." It's not what you remember. It's not what you experienced as a child. This is the message. And it's transformational for me. My life has been transformed by coming here. So come and see what it's about. Maybe they'll stay, maybe they won't. I have had my own friends come here once, and they never came again. And that's okay. That's okay. We're just saying, come and see. That's what it means to evangelize. And that will be the future of the church. I shared on our church's Facebook page a quote this week, which is from a book that's called Rescuing Jesus. And I wanted to read to you that quote today. The book Rescuing Jesus is written by a woman named Deborah Jeanne Lee. And this is what she has to say. I don't see the church disappearing. I see the church changing radically. Churches who are able to invite, include, and celebrate the diversity of humanity, those are the ones who are going to survive. The ones that can't do that, the ones who continue to make church about boundaries and who's in and who's out, those churches are going to become relics. So, let us at Douglas UCC continue to be a church that invites and includes and celebrates all the diversity of humanity, all 153 species of fish, and one big net of radical love and inclusion. If we keep our focus on that, we not only will survive, but we will continue to thrive and catch lots of fish. Namaste.